the higher self is innately connected with whatever religious thing you have, right? And I believe this to be on a literal level because from my experience of meditation, there has been this interesting perspective that has been brought to me that perhaps that maybe we have a ability to connect with this higher power that we believe in, but we can only do so if our pure intentions are to be positive and out looking for other people in a sense, right? So you can do research on like the pineal gland if you're interested in that, and it'll help you kind of at least develop a little bit of understanding. But it sounds it's really like beliefy. So if you're like kind of one of those like people like I was who was kind of like hard stuck and like saying no or like very practical, I would say start off with meditation and then go into that. But anyways, so the reason why the that your higher self is the only like I guess guru that you need is because when you are looking in an area to improve in your life, you often already have a very good guidance and a very good direction of where you want to go, right? You only you understand the higher version of you, right? Because it has to be defined. It has to be defined very exact and very accurately. Otherwise, you're going to be aiming towards something that isn't you. So, how do we get this, right? How do we start to understand that the higher form of ourselves is the person that's going to teach us the lessons? And I would say to first understand this, I'd go back to my point of saying meditate. Because when you meditate, you're clear your mind and there's no external distractions and it's all internal. You'll start to feel things you never really felt before internally. You'll start to see thoughts that haven't really existed before. And while it's good, it depends on what your focus is. If you're practicing for focus on like something and you're like focusing on your breath, then obviously you don't want to like go dive into thoughts. But if your focus is to become aware of everything that's happening, then maybe there'll be a couple thoughts in there that'll be like, okay. And then you can give yourself a guiding question like, okay, what do I need to improve on in my life? And then you meditate for a little bit and you're like, okay, maybe I'm not that patient. Maybe I'm getting a little bit arrogant in some situations, and then maybe I'm not as exact with how my efforts are usually. Like maybe you're not as good, is what I'm saying. So how do I go about this? And then you can go into journaling it or thinking about it and saying, okay, what is the solution to this problem and in this scenario and how I can become a better person? And then that sense is how you aim towards your higher self, by yourself, essentially. And another thing is that when there's external, I guess we'll call them the external desires, right? Money, wealth, fame, blah, blah, blah. Or, well, money, muscles, fame. You get the idea. It kind of corrupts the actual purpose that you may have for a higher development of your meaning and your what's in the title of this video? Your higher self, right? So ignore that part for a second. But so to get that higher self, to get that thing, you have to practice actually trying to understand it. That's the first thing about anything is understanding it, right? Like if you're going to learn accounting, for example, or you're going to learn how to do, I don't know, how to like cook something, you have to understand what you're doing, right? If you're just like spraying a random spray on your pan, right? Like maybe it's like non-stick spray, and you don't even know it's non-stick. You're just like a random spray. You're like, okay, well, what is this thing doing, right? Because like, what if it's putting toxic chemicals into your food and you're just gonna fucking die? It's like, okay, well, I didn't know that, but like now you do. So I'm not saying anything about, I don't know anything about non-stick, by the way, so don't like relate to that. But when you start to understand the concept of your higher self, I'm more patient, I'm less arrogant, I'm more giving, I'm more kind to people, even if it's people that I don't exactly like their values. Okay, now you have something that you can accurately aim towards. And that can only be really produced by you, the person experiencing life. And if you get absorbed into the external outcomes of life without at least considering what your internal drive is to do the thing, then you're going to end up just abusing yourself behind a screen or behind something to make your money, to get your whatever, right? And then it's not going to be a very fun life for you, you know? So time is much more important than money if you want a quick lesson, because time is how do I word this? Time is less no. Time is finite, money is infinite, right? Jeff Bezos has whatever $1 billion, right? But he doesn't have billions of hours of time. He only has 24 hours in a day, just like us. It's about reprioritizing his things to get more money in business. He knows that, right? And that's his higher self, essentially. I mean, you think. But maybe it isn't. Maybe his higher self is not owning a business at all. We don't know this, right? That's why it is in the control of the individual person, and in a sense, why the higher version of yourself is only guaranteed as you being a guru to yourself, right? So, to continue push this idea, let's say you want to be a more calculated, more careful person. Okay, well, action turns into thought, turns into belief, turns into perception. I learned this from Alex Hormozy. So the action of being more careful maybe would be like watching where you're stepping. Maybe that's the first thing, right? Watch where you're stepping when you're outside. Okay? Try to avoid the poop or whatever, right? Just watching where you're stepping. Maybe that's your first step, being more careful. Then you can develop the mindset of being more careful and being like, okay, well, how can I apply that somewhere else? Or maybe in more of like a place that I want to be put. And then you can go, well, I want to be careful how much screen time I have. Okay, then you have to be consciously aware of the time. Consistently. Okay, I could do that. Because now you obtain the practice of being careful on your feet, being careful in your mind. It'll help expand that into other territories, essentially. And with that, you can only really find that thing within yourself, right? Because you know what the easy example is for you to develop that set of beliefs, the set of ideas. But what you don't know, perhaps, is the ways of how to access this knowledge, which is what I'm essentially trying to provide to you in this video with the meditation and blah, 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 all that stuff. So, to get into the real meat of things, we have to understand that aiming towards a higher self is not just defined as something, but it is actually making progress towards it, okay? You can spend all your time refining, but it's more important to you if you just get a little bit of refining and execute, and then you get more refined and execute on that. Since it'll be like a challenge level, right? So what you can execute on based on what your definition is. So maybe you want your definition to be a little bit higher than you can execute, so then it forces you to become better. Boom, you can now execute better things. Define things better, execute on that better thing. Because if you define it to such an exact finite thing all the way up here, you're down here still, right? You can't like just jump up to here. You have to get all the experience levels through life and time. So you have to like build up, get more accountable, get more socially acceptable, do more things that people like, build it up over time, get more experience, consistency, so on and so forth. It's with everything in this world that consistency rules. It's just a common factor, right? It's like basically taking math fractions, right? Maybe taking 1/3 and 2/6, right? Maybe that's like engineering and business consulting, and bringing them both back down to like 1/3. So maybe 3/9 and 1/3, for example, right? Bring it back down to 1/3, which is accountability, or whatever it may be, right? And then you find those different aspects of your life require these certain traits, and then you develop those traits, which is the development part that'll get you to your definition of who you are, right? And then again, until you reach essentially a satisfactory point for you, where you can then say, okay, I enjoy the being that I am currently. Let me just sit here and be grateful that I had the opportunity to do this thing. There you go. And now you understand the higher self is really within yourself, you know? And external absorption of content won't really bring you to your higher self. You have to actually practice it with action in your real world, right? You have to practice it with action and seeing the results and updating your beliefs constantly. That's basically how a business works, right? You have to constantly update your beliefs. Because if your beliefs are hindered by what other people think, then you're not going to be able to be yourself, and you're not going to be able to have that golden purpose that people talk about. Which really the purpose is more of an execution, not an ideology. And what I mean by this is that when you're aiming for a purpose, right? When you have a certain set of beliefs in mind that you want to convert yourself into, that's in the action, you know? It's in the action of your daily life that you're like, okay, I actually do want to do this. I actually do want to do this. And it gets reinforced every single time. I actually want to do this. I actually want to do this. Then eventually, you just do it naturally, right? Eventually, you naturally walk over to the granny and put the cards in her trunk. Boom. You know? And then you get a really good place of order for you. And then you're also able to understand that there's some chaos that can occur and that you'll be okay because you know the skill sets to bring yourself back to the belief and the ideal self that you have, right? You'll be able to say, okay, well, maybe this day is just like fucking chaotic. None of my habits are getting done normally. I'm doing things that I would normally never do. Tomorrow, put yourself back in order. Aim towards that thing that's yours. And you can do that all by yourself. You don't even have to listen to me to do it. But what I would say is that you should at least listen to this, that way you can help yourself to understand the higher concept of praise, which essentially you do deserve if you practice it enough. I hope that makes sense, because that just sounded really confusing in my head, so I hope that makes sense to you. I apologize. But I don't know, is there anything else that should be mentioned? Let me think. I don't see anything. But, I mean, the higher self is within yourself if you take the time to discover it within you internally, right? That's what you should do today. That's what you should do tomorrow. And that's what you should do next week, at least in my opinion, obviously. It's just merely a suggestion of an idea. You don't ever have to take it. You don't have to do anything with it. You can just have it contemplate in your mind when you're doing things you don't want to be doing, and then stick with that. You can totally do that. Although it would be a lot of mental strain, I would believe, but I mean, some people can work with that. So that's gonna be it from me. I hope this helps you understand that the higher self is really within you, and you can become a lot better of a person by showing those ideas through your actions in day-to-day life as you know, right? And maybe you don't get it right the first try, right? That's totally fine. If you don't get it right the first try, that's a good thing, because that means that you're actually aiming towards something that takes some time to develop, right? It's like basically saying, if you can dribble a basketball up and down, that's your goal. It's like, nobody wants to do that. Everyone wants to fucking do crossovers and break people's ankles. It's like, well, you gotta practice. You gotta practice a lot more than just... Same thing here. Same thing with your ideas, right? It's all interconnected when you get this broader view of the world and you get a deeper understanding of yourself. So, that'll be it for me on the reasoning behind how you can develop into your higher self with just your own intuition and being. And if you look internally, you know yourself better than anybody else. However, you do not perceive yourself as best as anyone else could. That's a very important lesson. And what I mean, to clarify that real quick, is that you can't perceive how you actually are in society compared to other people, because other people can do it a lot better for you, and they can help you understand that, hey, you're not good at this thing, or hey, you're really good at this thing, you know? And you can receive the audience feedback, essentially, with that. So, that's gonna be it for me. Thank you for watching, and I can do the thing now. I always like doing the thing. I'll make it like a tradition. I'll like do the thing now. I don't know why. I just did it like a random video a couple months back. I just like did this, and now I do it all the time. But it's not too bad. Have a good day. And as always, we're here to help you help them.